Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing well and in good health, inshallah. My name is Khadija Addi, and today I'm going to talk about the oral approach in situational language teaching. I already made this presentation in form of PowerPoint and audio, but many of my friends told me that the audio didn't work for them because they need to download another application so that they can listen to the audio. And I said, why not to make a video? I think the video is better than the audio because you can follow with me, you can listen to me and at the same time follow with me in the PowerPoint, and also because I modified some slides in the presentation. Okay, so yeah, the oral approach and situational language teaching. This method came after, concerning the order, it came after the direct method. So the first method is the grammar translation method, then direct method, then the oral approach in situational language teaching. After this method, there is the audiolingual method or army method. So this method, the oral approach in situational language teaching, it appeared or was established in Britain. An audiolingual method was in the United States. Concerning this method and audiolingual method, I am mentioning the audiolingual method because there are a lot of similarities between them, the situational language teaching and audiolingual method. So both of those methods, they came after the direct method. Both of them, they came approximately at the same period. Which period? The Second World War period. Okay, and yeah, the professor already mentioned something. Why did the applied linguists in the United States and applied linguists of Britain didn't meet? Because of course if they met, maybe they will establish one method, okay, because they have a lot of similarities, okay. I'm talking about two methods. So yeah, because of the Second World War, that's why the applied linguists couldn't meet. So there was the oral approach in situational language teaching in Britain and the audiolingual method in United States. Okay, good. So now we will go to the background of the oral approach in situational language teaching. I hope the idea is clear. Okay. Background: in 1920s and 1930s, Palmer, Hornby, and other British linguists were familiar with the direct method. So Palmer and Hornby and other linguists or other British linguists who developed the oral approach in situational language teaching, they knew about the direct method. They were familiar with it. So yeah, they attempted to develop a more specific foundation for an oral approach to teaching language or to teaching English. So they knew about direct method, but they wanted to develop a more specific one or a more specific oral approach. So the result was a systematic study of the principles and procedures of selection and organization of the content. So I said they knew about direct method and they wanted to develop a more specific one, and the result was a systematic study of the principles and procedures of selection and organization of the content. So it was very specific and systematic concerning the selection and organization of content. So two important things in this method. There is the control on vocabulary and control on grammar. So concerning control on vocabulary, some linguists they gave much importance to vocabulary, and some others they give it to reading. So at the end, they found that a mastery of set of high frequency vocabulary items is believed to lead to good reading skills. So the vocabulary leads to for students to have good reading skills. So there is that connection between both vocabulary and reading. Now we move to the control on grammar. An analysis of English and a classification of its prominent grammatical structures into sentence patterns is believed to help learners internalize grammatical rules. So here we can say that concerning this method, concerning the control on grammar, it sees that in order for learners to know the grammatical rules, okay, the teacher should classify the grammatical structures into sentence patterns. Okay, so for learners to internalize the grammatical rules, there should be an analysis and a classification of grammatical structures into sentence patterns so that students can know the grammatical rules. So the result of all this is that the involved, those applied linguists of Britain, they involved systematic principles of selection, gradation, and presentation. So selection, the selection of the content, what they are going to teach in grammar, what they are going to teach in vocabulary, etc., in sentence patterns, etc. Then gradation, gradation or the grading principle. It's about starting from the simple to the complex, or from the easiest to the hardest. And presentation, which is when the teacher presents or starts teaching the language. So characteristics. What are the characteristics of this method, the oral approach and situational language teaching? So language teaching begins with the spoken language. Material is taught orally before it is presented in written form. So concerning new language points or new vocabulary words, they are introduced or presented. They are presented orally, then in the written form. Okay, so it is called the oral approach. The target language is the language of the classroom. Exactly like the direct method, the language that is used in the classroom is the target language, and unlike the grammar translation method, where there is a use of a native language in the classroom. So this method uses the target language in the classroom. New language points are introduced and practiced situationally. So this is very important. New language points, you mean here like vocabulary, etc. They are introduced and practiced situationally. So if the teacher wants to teach new language points, he's not going to teach them just like that. How can I explain this? But he explains the lesson, or he teaches them the vocabulary in a situation. He puts he puts the students in a context and situation so that they can better understand those language points. Okay, good. So vocabulary selection procedures are followed to ensure that an essential general service vocabulary is covered. So concerning vocabulary, the very essential and vocabulary, the very essential and general vocabulary should be covered. And items of grammar are graded following the principle that simple forms should be taught before complex ones. Yeah, so this is this is the grading principle or gradation. So the grammar is taught starting from the simple to the complex, or from the easy to the hard. And writing and reading and writing are introduced once a sufficient lexical and grammatical basis is established. So this method actually focuses on all the language skills, okay, reading, writing, listening, speaking, okay. But the first thing that this method pays attention to is the vocabulary or lexic and the grammar, okay, the grammar rules. And then after those two important skills are covered in the classroom, then the teacher can move to reading and writing. So lexic and vocabulary first, then reading and writing. Okay. So yeah, it was the third principle that became a key feature of the approach in the 1960s, and it was then the term situational was used increasingly referring to the oral approach. So the oral approach is situational language teaching in 1920s and to 1930s. We said it was established at that time, that period of time, but it was called only the oral approach. Okay, but if you remember, if you remember, uh, one of the most important characteristics of this method is that I said in the third characteristic, I said this is very important because when I said new language points are introduced situationally, or the teacher puts the students in context. So there was much use of the situations and context in the classroom. So that's why in the 1960s the term the oral approach was or instead of saying just the oral approach, it was labeled also the oral approach and situational language teaching. Okay, because of that characteristic, that's why it was changed to that name. Okay, so if you see if you notice the characteristics of the direct method, the characteristics of the oral approach to situational language teaching are very similar to the characteristics of direct method, right? So what's the difference between them? The difference between the method between this method and the direct method is that this latter lacked a systematic basis in theory and practice. So yeah, this latter, I mean here the direct method, it was not like very systematic and specific. So okay, it lacks that systematicity. Okay, in theory and practice, we're talking about theory, the theory of language learning, and practice. Here we mean the procedure. Okay, so do not worry about the difference between them. This is I think the most important thing is that the direct method wasn't very systematic as the situational language teaching. That's it. Yeah, now we move to the approach. So theory of language and theory of language learning. Theory of language, here the structural view, I made a mistake in the word view. So the structural view of language is the view behind the oral approach in situational language teaching. Speech was viewed as the basis of language and structure, as being the heart of speaking ability. So here, concerning the theory of language, there is we can say the structural view. Okay, in which we can see that speech here was viewed as the basis of language and structure, so as being the heart of speaking ability. So the importance of speech and structure. Okay, theory of language learning. The theory of learning underlying situational language teaching is behaviorism, addressing more the processes than the conditions of learning. So here when we say the theory of language, I want to say here the theory of language learning, not language teaching. The theory of language learning. So yeah, the theory of language learning is behaviorism, and we already said that in theory of language learning it can be either process oriented or condition oriented, but concerning this method it is process oriented. Okay, and there are a lot of principles in this view of language learning, like habit formation, memorization, etc. Now we move to the design. Concerning the objective of of this method is to teach a practical command of the 4 basic skills of language. So I said that this method it teaches all the 4 skills, okay, all the 4 skills, but of course it gives much importance to speaking, to listen and speaking first, then reading and writing, but all of them are covered in the classroom or in the course. Skills are approached through structure. There is importance of structure and grammar. Syllabus. Situational language teaching uses structural syllabus and the word list, where the structures are always taught within sentences, and vocabulary is chosen according to how well it enables sentence patterns to be taught. So the syllabus is the structural syllabus. There is the word list, or there is let's say the vocabulary, and this the structure, okay, or the grammar. Vocabulary and grammar are taught in the situational language teaching lesson, and you in page 42 in the handout, you're going to see how the teacher teaches vocabulary and sentences and structures at the same time. Okay, good. Types of learning and teaching activities. Situational language teaching employs a situational approach to presenting new words and sentence patterns, objects, demonstration, mime, and action. No use of translation or description. So in the situational language teaching, it employs a situational approach to presenting new words. So in order for the teacher to present or to teach new words and sentence patterns, he's not going to use description or translation. He's not going to use the native language in order to teach them the words or something, but he's gonna use action, mime, demonstration, objects, gestures in order so those are the activities that are used in the classroom so that students would understand without the use of the native language. Learner role. So the role of the learner here is or the learner has a passive role. Learners listen and repeat what the teacher says and respond to his question and comment. So this is what they do. They listen and repeat what the teacher says and respond to his questions. They have no control over the content of learning, and the participation is highly encouraged in the classroom. They are exposed to respond and ask each other in the classroom. Okay, it is not just like teacher to teacher, student teacher, like the grammar translation method, but here the teacher and students, and also between there is that interaction between students as well. Teacher role. The role, of course, if the role of the learner is passive, of course the teacher is going to be active. The teacher has 3 roles. Plays 3 roles. The first one, model, means he sets up situations and context. He puts students in a context. He creates that situation. Skillful conductor means he's responsible for management. And 3, manipulator. He asks questions and gives commands to students. Now move to the role of instructional material. In instructional material, there is this method relies on 2 things: textbooks and visual aids. Textbooks in which there is the teaching of the grammatical rules and grammar structures, okay, and visual aids, we mean here pictures. He shows them objects, okay, so that he can teach them the vocabulary words. So yeah. Procedure. This method aims to move from controlled to freer practice of structures, and from oral use of sentence patterns to their automatic use in speech, reading, and writing. So this method, it aims, or it has that goal of that students should use the language that they learn in the classroom. They should use it automatically in their speech and writing and reading and writing. So regarding the advantages of this method has 4 advantages. The first one is that the subject matter can be explained easily. So when the teacher uses mime demonstration objects to explain to students, it can be easy for students to understand and for the teacher to explain as well. It helps to introduce the vocabulary, including abstract vocabulary, by using rare as well as planned situation. So concerning the concrete vocabulary, instead it is taught to showing the students objects and pictures, etc. But concerning the abstract vocabulary, it is taught by using or by putting the students in situation and context. So teaching becomes very effective, interesting, and alive instead of a burdensome process. So the teaching process becomes interesting and effective. Meaning is clearer and easier to understand, which facilitates the students in learning the language knowledge by heart. So when the teacher uses situation, etc., the teaching and learning activities that we already talked about, the meaning becomes very clear and easy for students to understand. Now we move to the disadvantages. There are 3 disadvantages. I mentioned here 3 disadvantages. So the teachers found it difficult to present all the items in the appropriate situation, and this form an extra burden for teachers. Like this method, it is good, but it also has some advantages. One of them is that sometimes it's really hard for teachers to give that appropriate that appropriate situation or context for students. Okay, it's not always easy to give to students situations every day. It's not easy. The learner has no rule over the content. The learner has no control over the content, and there is no account for the fundamental characteristics of language, namely the creativity and uniqueness of individual sentences. So there is no use of creativity or something in the classroom. Students just listen and repeat what the teacher says, and Chomsky mentions also this in his criticism. So many premises underlying the approach. Here we're talking about criticism of the situational language teaching. Many premises underlying the approach have been criticized. For example, Chomsky in 1957, it showed that the structural and behavioristic approaches to language are simply incorrect, as they do not explain the fundamental feature of language learning, the ability to create novel and unique sentences. Children do not acquire their mother tongue through repetition and habit formation. There must be, however, an innate predisposition that lead them to a certain kind of linguistic competence. So Chomsky here criticized that structural and behavioristic view of language and language learning. He said that this method or the use of these 2 views doesn't allow, especially behavioristic view, doesn't allow students to create and have that unique, uniqueness, as I already said. So they just listen and repeat. So he said that this is not the way we acquired our mother tongue, so we cannot acquire or learn the second language or foreign language using this way of repetition and habit formation. Conclusion: the principles of situational language teaching, with its strong emphasis on oral practice, grammar and sentence patterns, conform to the intuition of many language teachers, where national English as foreign language and English as second language syllabuses continue to be grammatically based. It continues to be widely used, though not necessarily widely acknowledged. So this method is still being used in some countries till today. And what I want to add is that the difference between this and direct method is that I said direct method was not very systematic in terms of theory and practice. Also because I said that there are a lot of similarities between this method and the audiolingual method. And this one I said it was established in Britain. The other one, audiolingual or R method, was established in the United States. And I said they were both established approximately at the same period, but this method was before the audiolingual method. And I said why the applied linguists in US and UK or in Britain didn't meet at that time, because the circumstances of Second World War. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your listening. And if you have any questions, just ask me in the comments, okay? And if I know, of course, if I know the answer, I'm going to respond to you. And yeah, thank you so much. Goodbye.